afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar with RPC. My name is Fern and I'm part of the Student Success team at Target Jobs. I'm really excited to be joined by Lauren, who's here today from RPC and is going to be talking a bit more about their application processes, who RPC are, and just to answer any burning questions that you guys have. If you have any questions at all, then please feel free to pop them into the question tab, and Lauren will be answering them sort of more towards the end of our webinar. But for now, I'm going to pass over to Lauren.
So hi everybody, I'm Lauren. So thank you so much for joining us. So just introduction from myself. So I'm the Early Talent Executive here at RPC. So I'm based in the Bristol office, but cover kind of our initiatives across our Bristol and London office. And our kind of role as a team is the selection, recruitment and the development of our trainee solicitors and our legal apprentices, along with running our work experience programs such as our summer schemes and our 10,000 Black Interns program. So that's a little bit about what we do. So today we are going to look to cover a little intro about RPC. I'm not sure how much you guys have done research or know about us, so I'll do a small introduction about RPC, and then we'll move straight into the application session. So anybody who's interested in applying to RPC for our summer scheme or training contract opportunities, hopefully this will be really helpful when forming your application. And finally, we'll round off with Q&A. So just put your questions in the chat box or into the question chat box, and I will go through those at the end. But there should be plenty of time to go through questions. So just starting off about us at RPC. So RPC is a mid-size independent international law firm, and we're a full service practice covering insurance and commercial. In RPC, we have around 1,000 people across our 4 offices, which are based in Bristol, Hong Kong, London, and Singapore. And as part of that, so even though we don't have the largest international presence from an office perspective, we are part of the Global Access and the Terralex network. And these networks allow us to work with other firms, a part of those networks, who have offices and work within the different jurisdictions across all the different countries in the world. So pretty much most countries in the world we have kind of client work that we're working on clients' behalf for. So we definitely have a international presence. And what's the real benefit of being part of those networks, that we can appoint like the best firm for that particular area. So if it's a niche area, we can find a firm particularly for that who we can instruct, and also get local counsel advice as well. So they're really great networks, and that's really broadened our kind of international reach, which, like I said, covers like the whole of the world, pretty much most countries we have work within. And as you can see on the left hand side of the screen, these are our 5 pillars, and these are kind of an areas of focus for the firm, and each one kind of breaks down and utilizes a number of our different practice areas. So we have commercial and financial disputes, retail and consumer, technology and media, regulatory, and insurance. So for example, retail, the umbrella would come under like M&A, tech, restructuring, insolvency, real estate, those types of things. So that's our pillars, but we are kind of recognized within kind of 2 main markets, the market for being best clients and the market for the best people. And most of our energy and investment is directed at both of these and to ensure success. So moving on to the next slide. So this is our RPC legal teams. So in Bristol, we are majority insurance with a couple of commercial teams growing within the Bristol team, whereas London, it's a split of insurance and commercial. So you could, as a trainee, if you were based in London, you could do any 4 seats across insurance and commercial, from kind of construction, cyber, medical and life sciences, property and casualty international, PFR. Lots of really interesting insurance work that we do. And then on the other side, commercial is corporate, media, like IP and tech, commercial contracts, we do employment. We do loads of great stuff, commercial and banking litigation, which is one of our kind of largest teams. So as a trainee, you complete 4 6-month rotations. And as part of that in London, you will do at least one commercial seat, one insurance seat, and then 2 others. So that could be 2 more insurance seats, 2 more commercial seats. It could be client secondment. It could be international secondment. So hopefully you'll get a real broad insight to the different areas of law to help you kind of make that decision of where you might see yourself as a newly qualified solicitor. And then finally, just about RPC, there's so much to talk about, but I think the people and culture is a really key thing to talk about. I think anybody you ask, and this isn't, nobody is told to say this, but if anyone one was asked, 99% of people would say the reason, well, one of the reasons they work at RPC is the people and culture. And what's really great about RPC is you get the high quality work, but you get that great culture with it as well. So this is just a few things that we do, and I won't go through them all because I know that kind of the applications workshop is going to be of most interest to you guys. But just to kind of pinpoint a few things, so we've really embraced the opportunities offered by flexible ways of working, and that's really to empower all of our people with the ability to kind of shape how much they want to be in the office and at home. So that's kind of a one key thing about our culture. And we really want everyone at RPC to feel valued, respected, and really free to be themselves. And if anyone's seen our early talent page, like strikingly real is our kind of slogan for our early talent. And I think that's really true. We want people to be their authentic selves and bring themselves to work. And that really does come through into the culture of RPC. And I think it really differentiates us. But there's a number of programs that we've kind of put together that to enhance that. And one things I'll talk about is our communities, our I&D communities. So that is a mix. These are communities that anybody can join from day one of being at the firm, and that will be they could be around belief, ethnicity, enable, family, social mobility, LGBTQ plus, which is called RAIN. So all of those communities are people who have a real interest in those particular areas. You don't even need to be part of those communities if you've got an interest in that and improving ways that we work at the firm. Then you can join, and it really helps shape the firm into what we want it to be. Because even though we think we do a great job, that there's always more that we can do. So we really encourage people to be part of those conversations and to form those decisions. We also have our charity partner, UOcean, who we've worked with, I think 3 or 4 years now. But we work with them in UOcean. Their mission is to kind of clean the oceans and kind of rivers and waters around the world. And we often go out, and as you can see in that picture, go out on the boats and clean up the waters, and we do that regularly throughout the year, and opportunities for people to volunteer. And we work with lots of people such as Bright Network, WCAN, Aspiring Solicitors, Uptree, Target Jobs, to attract a real broad range of individuals to RPC as well. So I won't stay on this slide for too long because I want to go into the applications session, but please ask any questions if you've got any questions about that. But I would just say our culture is really great, and I've actually only worked at RPC for 18 months, and before joining I've not ever worked at a law firm, and I was so pleasantly surprised joining RPC. Everybody's so friendly, everyone's so welcoming. Like partners, senior associates, anybody of all level will say hello to you in the morning, even if they've never met you before. It's just a really friendly and like inclusive culture, and hopefully. Well, I think most people feel like that. Most people, if they ask why they want to work at RPC, as I said, they just enjoy the culture so much as well as the great work. So it's a bit about our culture. So moving on to the application session. So hopefully this will really help you, give you some top tips and pointers and some insight around how to form your application. Obviously, application season can be quite stressful and overwhelming and not really know where to start. So hopefully this will be helpful for you. So to start with, so what are firms looking for in kind of training solicitor applicants? Usually, if I was in person, I would ask people to shout out some things that maybe people would think. Um, but I'll go straight to it. So competencies and skills that we might be looking for. So here is a real broad range of competencies and skills that we'd be looking for in an application. And that's not to say someone needs to be all of those, because it'd be pretty hard to be all of those and be great at all of those. But it's about finding what your strengths are and how to showcase them. And what one person is great at may be a development area for somebody else, and vice versa. So, and we really encourage, and I think it's really reflected in our trainee cohorts, that everybody has their different strengths that they bring to table, and that's so important in a firm, that everyone has kind of their different strengths and areas that they bring to the firm, their training contracts, their trainee cohort, which is really important. Some key ones I'd probably point out. I think resilience is really key as being a trainee. It's a hard 2 years, and even on the lead up, you've got obviously university, you might be doing a conversion if you didn't do law, or going straight into the SQE. So it's a tough start. You've got a lot of studies, a lot of exams to go through, and then finally you've got your 2 year training contract, where you'll sit in different seats. And it's a tough year, tough 2 years. It's great 2 years, but also you're learning a lot. You're doing things that you probably never got involved in before, which is great. And also as part of that is making mistakes, and that is part of learning. So we definitely encourage that, and like learning from those and growing and developing from those. But from a resilience perspective, sometimes you'll have a great day, and then there'll be days that aren't so great, and it's about pulling yourself together and coming in with a positive attitude the next day, for example. So resilience is really important. I think teamwork is really key, because as a trainer, you'll be working with lots of different people. And I think it goes a long way if people want to work with you and you being kind of willing to work with lots of different people and those types of things. So working as a team and working together to solve problems is really important. And then something else I would say, communication from a verbal and written perspective is really key. Any opportunities you get, if you're at university or you're at work or whatever point you're at currently, if there's any opportunities where you can practice your written or verbal communication, will really help you in your application process, not just for the application process, but also the assessment days and all of those types of things. So if you get an opportunity to do a presentation, even if you don't like presentations, um, once upon a time I used to hate presentations, and the more you practice, you start to enjoy them and start feeling comfortable with talking to people. So absolutely do take that opportunity to do that, because that will really help coming into a training contract, and also your attention to detail. And I think that goes along with your written communication. Attention to detail is so important as a lawyer. So anything that you can do to develop your attention to detail, any tasks that you can get involved in, whether it's university, extracurricular groups, societies, a part-time job, absolutely do that. But there's so many things that goes into a great trainee. They're just pinpointing a few, and every firm is looking for something slightly different potentially. But I would say in whole, these are the types of things that and competencies that firms might be looking at in a trainee. So moving into the recruitment process itself. So our recruitment process starts with our online application form. So for all of our opportunities, you need to do the online application form. You can't send like a CV or anything to be considered for a role. You do need to do the application form, which you can find online on our early talent page, which will kind of direct you to all the links that you would need to apply. And we'll go into some more detail about kind of the application process and how to kind of make the most of that shortly. Following that, if you have scored well and done well within your application form, we would invite you to an online Watson Glaser test. So the online Watson Glaser critical thinking test assesses the ability to identify and analyze problems and how you evaluate that information. And that's kind of really helps to show kind of how you make decisions and your decision making process. And you'll have 30 minutes to complete 40 questions, which I know sounds quite overwhelming to do 40 questions in 30 minutes. What I would definitely recommend you to do is take practice tests. If you're looking to apply to RPC, and I know quite a lot of other firms use Watson Glaser as part of their recruitment process, there's so many resources online to do practice tests. Those practice tests will help you get comfortable with the types of questions they ask, what they're looking for, and the time constraints. The more you do them, the more comfortable you feel when you approach the actual test. And if you don't do those ahead of time and you get invited to the online Watson Glaser with RPC, we will send you a link to be able to complete a practice test ahead of completing the actual test. So there's lots of opportunity to do practice tests ahead of doing it. Once you've completed that, we'll then look at your application form and your Watson Glaser score holistically, and they kind of complement each other, so we can get a broader view of kind of your skills, competencies, and motivations for a training contract. And then following there, we will shortlist to assessment day. The assessment day, for our London opportunities, which we're recruiting for this year, we do the assessment days in London in our office, or we do have some virtual assessment days also for those who can't travel to London. And the assessment days, they're quite long days, so they're from quite early in the morning, maybe like 8:30, 9 o'clock, through to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So they're a long day, but hopefully we make them as enjoyable as possible. You'll have 3 assessed tasks. So you'll have a interview with a partner and a member of the HR team. You will have a written exercise and then also a discussion exercise as well. So as part of that whole morning, you actually only have 3 assessed elements. In addition to the assessment pieces, we will provide you an opportunity to have a trainee Q&A, so you can ask the people who are actually doing the training contract, their experiences and their insights. Um, and then we'll also organise an office tour, so you can see our offices where you might be working if you get offered a training contract. And finally, we'll do a networking lunch, which is quite nice. The networking lunch is after all of your assessed elements, an opportunity to kind of wind down, hopefully relax a little bit and kind of reflect on the day, and also connect with other trainees, associates, senior associates, and different people within the firm. Again, take those opportunities to network. The best people to speak to about a firm is the people who are working at the firm. I can tell you how amazing RPC is, and I do work at RPC, but speak to the people who are in training contracts, speak to the people who are doing the current work, like the legal work. They'll be able to give you the best insights into that. And then finally, after that, after you've gone through that process, we'll look to offer you a summer scheme place if you've applied for our summer scheme opportunity, or the training contract if you've done the direct route. So majority for London of our trainees are recruited through the summer scheme. So we recruit 14 to 15 trainees in London per year, but we do run direct training contracts. So if there's any reason why you can't attend a summer scheme, then absolutely do apply for the direct training contract, because we do recruit for that route as well. The reason I say summer scheme, obviously we do recruit through it more. However, I think it's a massive benefit to you of doing the summer scheme, because you get to meet the people, you get to spend 2 weeks at the firm, and you get to do real life work, so you get a much better insight into RPC by spending 2 weeks with us. I know it's not a really extended period of time, but you're going to get much more of an insight than just an assessment day. Plus, we do socials, lots of networking opportunities. It's just I think it's a hard 2 weeks because there's a lot to learn and lots of opportunities, but it's actually really fun. And all of our summer scheme students always seem to have really great friendships after. So definitely, if you can do the summer scheme, I would encourage you to do that. And then in Bristol, so we're not recruiting for our Bristol trainees this year because we've already recruited them a year ahead. But usually we recruit anything between 2 and 4 trainees in Bristol per year, but they are recruited directly and we don't run a summer scheme in Bristol. So that's the recruitment process. So moving on to the application form. So I'll go through some, maybe it might seem some obvious things, but sometimes a good reminder. So when approaching the application form, firstly, contact details. So use an email that you check regularly. Because we would hate a lot of the time, for example, if we invite you to the What's in Glazer, we invite you to assessment day, there's a certain amount of time that you need to either complete the test or confirm certain things. And beyond that time, you may not be kind of considered because we've already kind of shortlisted. So we would hate anybody to miss out on an opportunity just because they didn't check their email regularly enough. So absolutely do use an email that you check regularly. Saying that, make sure it's a professional email address. Remember, it's kind of your first impression to the employer, so RPC or whichever firm that you're deciding to apply to. So make sure it's professional when using the email address that you're providing. Academic results. So list all of your academic achievements, and we really do want to know about each module you study. Like, we do look at your application forms in thorough detail, so do provide all that detail. We look for a 2-1 at university, and we don't have a set A-level requirements, but we would encourage you to put your A-level achievements in, as we use rare contextualized recruitment. So we can put your grades into context. So for example, if your sixth form or college average for A levels was, I don't know, a BCC, and you achieved an ABB, well, that shows that you outperformed the average of your sixth form or college. So it just gives us further context of your academic achievements as well. And saying that, moving on to kind of adjustments and mitigating circumstances. So mitigating circumstances, if there's any reason that you may have not achieved the 2-1 that you wanted to achieve, or the grade that you wanted to achieve at university, and there was mitigating circumstances, if you feel comfortable, and by no means you don't have to, but we would encourage you to put those mitigating circumstances in the box, because we do take that into consideration, but only put that in there if you feel comfortable sharing that with the early talent team. The application form isn't seen by anybody else in the firm, so if you feel comfortable sharing it with us, it won't go anywhere any further, but it just gives us some more context again. And again, adjustments. If you require any adjustments throughout the assessment process, whether that's the application form, What's in Glazer, assessment day, do share that with us so we can take that into consideration and make sure that you're as comfortable and kind of everything is in place for you throughout the assessment process. Moving on to references. So we will approach references in advance if we offer you kind of a we're looking to offer you a training contract. So you just ask them before putting them down, so there's no surprises if we call them or email them asking for a reference about you, and they weren't expecting it. So make sure you just kind of give them the heads up and make sure they're happy to provide a reference ahead of submitting your application form. So we're moving on to work experience. I think this is really important. So put down all work experiences. I think you only have 8 boxes on the form, so I'd group certain things together and I'll go on to that shortly. But include any legal work experience, but definitely also include non-legal work experience. And I say that because there's so many transferable skills and qualities through any opportunities and any experiences that can translate into being a solicitor and a trainee. So don't discount a Saturday job. Don't discount being like a member of the society or doing all these different things. Whatever you've got involved in, do include that, because that gives us a fuller picture of kind of the things that you've been getting up to, maybe your interests. And what I would definitely say, do not think that you need legal work experience to apply for the summer scheme or training contract. I would say 50% or more trainees who get a summer scheme or training contract offer have never worked in a law firm and have never done any legal work. So all of our assessments are not based around kind of your legal experience and knowledge. That's just not the case. It's open to both law students and non-law students, people who's worked in their law firm and people who's not worked in a law firm. So do not worry if you've not got legal experience. I know it's really hard to get when you haven't got experience. So do not worry. There's so many things that you can take from a part-time job. For example, I used to work in Clark's when I was in college, and there's so many things I could pull out. If I was doing like an application for to do a summer scheme, I could think about like communicating with customers, like dealing with like queries and problems and problem solving there, managing workload. I might have like different deadlines. So just pulling all those different things out of your kind of experiences and being able to talk about that in the experience box, and how that relates to being a solicitor. Um, is perfectly fine and is great. We want people to have a variety of experiences, so do include those, and make sure um, you use the full word count in your application. So I don't know if anybody has opened an application or started, but I think there's a couple of questions which are written questions, and definitely use the full word count to provide enough detail and evidence of your skill set, of the questions, by exploring an understanding of law and your and current commercial topics. If you don't use the full word count, you won't be able to highlight your skill set and evidence it. You won't be able to talk about kind of a commercial topic in detail and succinctly. And it's not a big word count. So if you're not using that word count, you've definitely not got enough detail in your answer. So definitely go back to it, and reevaluate where you can kind of inject more detail or evidence into your answers. And then finally, key strengths and skills. So we looked on that slide a few slides ago on kind of what key strengths and skills are important for trainees to have. So really think about that slide and think, what am I really good at? And what do I want to showcase? And I think that's really important. And that's really helpful as just part of your application form to showcase that. But it's actually like pre-work for your assessment centre, because you can use all of that if you get invited to assessment centre around your kind of competencies and skills, and you'll have like different well-rounded answers to competency-based questions in interviews and also in application forms. So if you think about resilience, for example, you could think about a time when you've been resilient, because I would definitely encourage any kind of competency based question to use examples. So think about all the different skills that they might be testing, or exploring, and just try and think of different examples of what you could use. And I would definitely encourage you, even if you have legal work experience, which is great, but don't use legal work experience for every one of your examples. Interviewers want to hear about a variety of different experiences, and if you've got lots of different examples from different experiences, that will make your kind of interview more well-rounded, and they'll have a bit more of an insight about you. And finally, I would definitely recommend, particularly for the application form, but also for your interview questions as well, use a structure such as like the back model or the star model. So that's just really going to help you structure your answers in a concise way, get the evidence in, and make sure you're kind of rounding everything off. I would say though, make sure there is enough detail, but don't waffle on. I think being concise is very important, but make sure there's still detail in there. But hopefully, a model such as like the back model or the star model will help you kind of form those questions. So moving on to why you're applying to this firm. So this is a question on our application form, if anyone has started it, and it's quite a classic question that most law firms might ask, but we really want to know why you want to work here. And this is a really important question in the RPC application process. We've got a small trainee cohort, so we genuinely want people who want to work at RPC, not just as a backup. They want to work at RPC for whichever reason that the firm resonates with them. So this question is really important to us. So some things to help you form this answer, I will kind of start thinking about how you are going to demonstrate your knowledge of RPC as a business. So things that you can do, start with like website and kind of social media and different like publications and websites. So that's always a good starting point to gain like that base level of knowledge. But I would definitely recommend using like legal press and publications such as Rate My Placement, lawcareers.net, the Lawyer Portal, Legal Cheek, Chamber Student Guide, all about law. There's so many different like publications that you can go on to find out more about RPC. We also do podcasts. We do different blogs that get posted regularly. So just keep up to date with those types of things will really help kind of start forming your knowledge around RPC and why you might want to work for us. Secondly, identify the core business and practice areas. It's really important that you cover this in this question because realistically, we can say how amazing the culture is, benefits, this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, 90% of your day is going to be the work. So you want to make sure that you're going into a firm where the work aligns to your interests and your long-term career goals. So definitely research into our core business areas, or if you're looking to apply to other firms, their business areas to make sure it aligns. And when you talk about this potentially in this question, um, I would definitely encourage you to express interest in particular practice areas, but remain open-minded at the same time. Um, as we have insurance practices and commercial practices which intertwine quite closely, but you will need to do at least one commercial and one insurancy and then two others. So if there's only one place that you think that you would want to go and no other teams interest you, then that's not going to be great for your kind of training contract because only 6 months may be spent in the one team that you want to go in. If no other teams interest you, the other 18 months might not be quite for you. So make sure that you've got an interest in the broader practice area and the broader business. I would recommend. And things to think about also is our clients and any cases that we've been working on. So if there's anything in particular or a case that you've been reading about that RPC's been working on, you could always mention that and why that interests you, those types of things. And I was also encourage you to talk about our culture, um, and that's not just by reading it because every business is going to say their culture is great realistically. So I would encourage you to learn about the RPC culture by speaking to trainees, speaking to people in the firm, attending like events like this, and actually speaking to the people who are actually working at RPC because you'll get such a better sense of the culture from that other than just reading about it. So try and do all of those types of things to really form your decision and why the culture aligns with what you might want to do. So they're kind of my top tips on the application form. I would definitely recommend these are some top tips. Check your work 10 times if you can. It's so easy to look at your application form because you've been looking at it for so long that you miss mistakes like grammatical errors, spelling errors, the structure might be right, or a sentence might not sound quite right. So I definitely encourage you to read it quite a few times, and often take breaks before rereading it. Maybe take even a couple of days before coming back to rereading it, because it just gives you a fresher perspective. And I would even encourage you to get like somebody, like a family member or a friend or a partner, to read your application form, because sometimes a fresh pair of eyes who hasn't looked at your application form will spot any errors and things that you might have missed from looking at it for so long, and that really does go a long way in the application process. So do check it. Also, I know a lot of people have started to use AI for their applications, and although I would say it is resourceful to use it as a maybe a base start, I wouldn't rely on AI, because it's going to be very generic. Everyone's answer is going to sound the same, and you're just not going to stand out. I would much prefer to see someone's like authentic answers than a well put together one from AI, because we can tell the difference between a personal kind of question written in comparison to AI. So I would definitely encourage you to not use it, and if you do use it, just use it as like a base start to start, and then make it your own. I think that's really important. So moving on to assessment centres on the next slide. We are actually we've only got 25 minutes, so I'll try and rattle through the next few slides so that we get time for questions. So assessment centres. So assessment centres are designed by each firm to assess a specific skill or qualities throughout, and they typically contain similar exercises. So they could include online verbal reasoning, interviews, group exercises, presentations, written exercises, in-tray tests, client networking. So it could be any of those types of things. So as part of that, I would definitely encourage you, when you're in an assessment centre, is to think about, when you're approaching tasks, like, what are they trying to assess here? And uh, firms aren't trying to catch you out. They are just genuinely there to try and assess those different qualities and things like that. But what I would definitely say is that you're probably only going to get 2 or 3 assessment pieces. So you're not going to get 7 or 8 of what I've presented on there, but you're not going to know what you're going to expect specifically on an assessment day. A firm might share an outline, but they won't give you the details ahead of the assessment day. So some top tips I would recommend is, make sure, so for example, if you need to read any instructions for a particular task, read it thoroughly. Sometimes there might be a time constraint, but you will be thankful that you took that extra couple of minutes to read through it and know the direction that you want to go in with the particular task. Then get halfway through and realize that you feel like you're on the wrong track, just because you haven't read it thoroughly enough. So definitely take the time to read instructions. Also, I would definitely encourage you to, if there's any kind of written task or anything, allocate 5 to 10 minutes of your time to check it. I mentioned it in the slide before. Checking your work is so important. Attention to detail and how your written work is important. So give yourself time to make sure that you're happy with it before the end of an assessment. In addition, we'll go on to interviews in a few slides, but you'll usually have maybe one-to-one, you might have a panel, it could be a group interview, but expect anything from competency-based questions, scenario-based questions, could be situational judgment, and there is a reason to every question you are asked, and it's to see how you kind of think, how you provide your knowledge or evidence of a skill for kind of the role. So just think about what is the question actually asking you. So that's top tips for assessment centres. And then moving on to interview top tips. As I said, prepare for competency questions. So as I said before, pinpoint examples of when you have been proud of yourself or had a particular achievement and demonstrated skills that I talked about or shared on kind of one of the first slides of this session, and pinpoint those. So you've got them in the back of your head, and then you've got them in your back pocket in case those come up. And think of a broad range, as I said, of examples, so that it's well-rounded interview and you're not just talking about one particular experience. As in the opposite, but don't over prepare. So prepare, but don't over prepare. Reason why you can practice responses, but you don't want to kind of write scripts. You don't want to sound like you are reading off something, because you won't be authentic. It won't come across as like yourself, and the interviewers won't connect with you as easily. So I definitely encourage you to prepare and think of top points that you want to speak about in a particular kind of competency, but I wouldn't write out scripts because it just takes away from your personality. Um, Answer the question that's being asked. I know that sounds really obvious, but try to be succinct, try to keep to the point of the question, and try not to kind of go off topic. And that's why using kind of a structured model such as like the STAR technique or back model will really help you kind of keep your answers detailed but concise. And just to note, I don't, well, I can't speak on other firms, but I would be very surprised if firms are trying to catch you out. They're not asking you questions which mean something else. They're asking you the question that is the question. So there's no tricks within that. They just want to learn about that particular competency, for example. So answer the question being asked. Don't rush. Really do take the time to think before responding and stay calm. If you need a couple of seconds, do say to the interviewer, could I have a moment? And they'd be more than happy to allow you that moment to gather your thoughts. It's better to have that moment and have a pause before answering the question, rather than just starting to answer the question and then go off topic because you haven't thought about what you want to say. So definitely give yourself a moment. Be confident and smile. I think that really helps, even if you're not confident. Obviously, assessment centre is a nerve-wracking time, and you are going to feel nervous, but presenting that you're confident will really help with your actual confidence when answering questions, but also for the interviewer as well to kind of connect with you throughout the interview. And also be confident in yourself anyway. You've got to this point of an assessment centre, there are so many applications we get through. If you're being invited to an assessment centre, you're there for a reason. So be confident in your abilities and your knowledge and why you're there. So smile, have good eye contact, body language, like sitting upright, doing a handshake to the interviewers or the assessors before. All of those types of things really help a long way, not just for the interviewer, but for yourself as well, because you'll feel more confident in yourself, so your answers will come across more confidently. And then finally, ask good questions. Demonstrates your commercial awareness, and ask questions that you've not been able to find out through the research, through speaking to people. If you've got a partner as an interviewer, that is such a great opportunity to ask the partner direct questions about the firm or their work or anything. A partner is going to take more notice if you ask interesting and good questions. So I would definitely do that. And it's also a two-way process. So asking those good questions and finding all of those things is important for you to make that decision if you were to be offered. And then finally, how to make a good impression. I won't spend too much time on this because I want to get to questions, but make sure you read information carefully. If you've been invited to assessment day or a Watson Glaser test, make sure you thoroughly read all of that information and instructions that are provided or things that you might need to send back. It's a good first impression. You don't want the firm to be chasing you. You want to be the person who is being proactive as part of those different assessments. Dress smart. It's better to look over formal than under formal. Generally, RPC have a dress for your day policy. So sometimes I will dress smarter if I'm out at an event all day, or if I'm working from home. Today, like I've got a cardigan on, I've got some jeans and some Uggs on. So you could day to day at RPC, it flexes from formal to informal. However, I would say for an assessment centre, dress smarter, good first impression, and that you're taking it seriously. Allow time on arrival, plan your route ahead of time and long enough for you to arrive on time. I know that sounds really obvious, but probably, well, most people know kind of public transport can sometimes be unreliable. So just allow that extra time so that you can get there without being late. Make sure you have breakfast before as well. Keep your sustenance levels up. That will help your kind of concentration. Um, and finally, my last point is be confident. And I've said that before, but first impressions are key. And as I said, you have earned your place, and interviewers will want you to do well. So they're not there for you not to do well. They want you to do well, and they are rooting for you. So be confident in yourself and your abilities. Um, and that is coming to the end. I've just highlighted a few things on the application process. So you can find our application form on this link, but on our Early Talent website. Applications are open for penultimate year law students and final year non-law students or above. So if you're graduated or anything, you're also eligible. Um, I would encourage you to follow Life in a Law Firm. This is an Instagram account run solely by our trainees and apprentices. I don't think many firms do that, so definitely follow that. And I would encourage you to start our work experience programs. And if you do, I would suggest put those on your application form as work experiences. They should give you some real insight into the type of work that trainees do. So that is the application process. I'm going to stop there. Um, Fern, if we could stop sharing the slides, that would be great. And then I can jump straight into questions. One second, let me just get the chat box out. So let's get to the top. There's quite a few here. Do training contract offers and demand vary by offer and by office? Right, so hopefully that was helpful, but I will start at the top of questions. Do training contract offers and demand vary by offer? So please add some more context if I'm not answering this if I'm answering this incorrectly. But as I said, we hire 14 to 15 in London, and we do have a smaller number of like 2 to 4 in Bristol. So there is a variation there from office to office. When does the training contracts commence? So they commence every September. So we're now recruiting for September 2027. So if you attend a summer scheme or you apply for the direct training contract, that would be to start in September 2027. The next one, I didn't get the best grades in my first year modules, many modules in the 2-2 section, but overall just about 60% average overall. As a second year student, will this significantly disadvantage my chances? Definitely don't discourage you from applying. If there's any mitigating circumstances, do include those. But definitely just concentrate on, there's lots of things to get involved in at university, but just try and achieve kind of the best that you can, and you definitely can start a career in law, whether it's at RPC or elsewhere if you've got a 2-2, so, and be very successful. So don't let it discourage you at all. Do you have any alternative assessments to Watson Glaser? Currently no, unless it's an adjustment, and then we can look at different assessments. But if that's the case, then depending on your adjustment, we'll be able to advise kind of the best kind of route for assessment dependent on the adjustment. What would be the ideal referee? Would a manager of my current job be acceptable? So yes, definitely include a manager of your current job. That would be a great referee. If you've not had a job, like a tutor or like anything like that would be also helpful, or somebody who might oversee a society that you're part of, anything like that. So there's lots of people that you can hopefully rely on for a reference, but definitely a manager of your current job will be perfectly acceptable and be a great reference point. Would mentioning attending this webinar be beneficial to the application? Absolutely. I would say in the work experience boxes, I would use one box for all of the events that you've attended. That doesn't have to just be RPC events. It could be all different events that you've attended for different firms, for people, for like with target jobs, it might be with Bright Network, and I would lump them all together so you don't use up all your spots for your work experience, but I would definitely encourage you to include that because it just shows you're going that above and beyond to find more about the firm. Next question. Didn't go do well in my first year, got a third. I only got a 2-2 on my second year with 55%. I'm in my third year and trying to get a 2-1 because this is the minimum to applying for these training contract. Will this significantly disadvantage me? I think it's absolutely great that you're focusing on getting that 2-1. That will obviously help you in kind of the training contracts. But if there's any, like I said in previous, if you've not achieved something because of any mitigating circumstances, include that. But also don't let it discourage you. There will be absolute firms that will and opportunities to pursue a legal career, and you can be really successful whether you get a first, a 2-1, a second. So, but just focus on your studies. If you can achieve that 2-1, that'll be fantastic. Similar to Ramisa, how do university grades affect the application process? I.e., would a first class honour be more considerable to RPC than a 2-1? Not necessarily. Obviously, if you get a first, that's fantastic and a great achievement for you. But what I would say, I would prefer to meet a candidate who got a 2-1 and have more well-rounded experiences, whether they've been involved in hobbies, extracurricular, may have a part-time job, than someone who just has a first and is only focused on studies. Because being a lawyer is not all about academic, it is an intellectual role. So you do need to have that kind of intellectual level there for the role, but there is so much more to it, particularly with soft skills. So I would encourage you to get involved with your studies, do it best you can, but get involved in things that you're other things that you're interested in. That will also help application process of things that you can talk about as well. So no, I wouldn't say if someone's got a first over a 2-1, that means they're a better candidate. There's so much more into it that we take into consideration. Next question. Do you expect candidates to have good performance in all assessment day tasks, or can there be some weaknesses in some task areas and still be considered? Absolutely. We're not expecting everybody to be perfect. Everybody's going to have strengths, everybody's going to have development areas, and that is taken into consideration. And as part of our process, we take it all from a holistic viewpoint. So at point of assessment centre, we'll take in consideration your application form, your Watson Glaser, your assessment day, your interviews. So we take it all into consideration, and you're not going to get very many people who do well in every single thing, but just do your best in what you can. Be confident, even if you're a bit nervous about going into a particular assessment. If you feel like it's a development area for you, be confident, put your best foot forward, because that will help you really kind of bring you through that assessment. Let me get to the next one. Would attending the online assessment centre put me at a disadvantage to those who can attend physically? No, absolutely not. We offer people on the online assessment centre as much as in person. In person just might be nice because you get to see the office. But if you're invited to a summer scheme or a direct training contract, you get to do office tours and meet people anyway. But as part of the assessment process, the only benefit I would say would be that you get to see the office, get to meet people in person, from your perspective to learn more about the firm. But you'll have exactly the same amount of opportunities. You'll still do a trainee Q&A virtually. You'll still be able to ask partners questions. The only difference is there won't be a networking lunch and there wouldn't be an office tour. So that is the only difference. So it won't be put you at a disadvantage at all. Do you review questions at do you review applications on a rolling basis? We review applications on a rolling basis, but we don't make decisions until past the deadline date. So I'd encourage you to get your application in earlier rather than later. Make sure you give yourself enough time to produce a quality application, but don't do it at the last minute. Reason being, there's a lot of applications that get submitted just before the deadline, and I would say it's harder to stand out when there's lots of applications coming through rather than when there's a steady level. That's just my top tip. 1 second. Do you sponsor international students for training contracts? Yes. So for the summer scheme, you do need to have right to work in the UK, whether that's a student visa or a different type of visa or anything like that. However, if you don't, I would encourage you to apply for the direct training contract because we sponsor international students and that's all paid for by the firm if you're successful. What's that? Is there any possibility to start earlier than September 2027 if you get a training contract? There may be some opportunities, but that's like if things move around. I would say if you're applying, expect 2027, but you could always express your interest of coming forward. If you're going to be eligible to come forward based on where you're at your studies. But it's not given and it's unlikely, but that's not to say that it's not happened before, that people have been brought forward. Do you fund the conversion course for non-law graduates? Yes. So if you are a non-law graduate, we will fund that for you. Thank you, Lauren. What makes an individual or a training contract / vacation scheme application stand out to you? I think be authentic, be yourself, and I think that's hard to do by putting it on a piece of paper to get personality into it. But that's why I think using examples and experiences are so important. I think another thing that stands out is your genuine interest in the firm, and I talked about that in the presentation. There's definitely a difference between someone who genuinely wants to work at the firm and who's just kind of took bits off of the website and things like that to form their answer. So be authentic and be genuine in your answers. I would say something else that stands out would be what stands out. Sorry, my dog's barking, if anybody can hear. I would say attention to detail, like I've said. I would say something that stands out to me is someone who can also talk. I think the commercial issue piece is really good. Because there is a commercial question, and I would suggest you talk about something that genuinely interests you. I would say don't talk about it just because you think it's like a topical thing to talk about. Talk about something that genuinely interests you, even if it's niche, because you will talk about it much more passionately throughout. So I would definitely encourage you to do that. And one thing I think stands out is when people link their experience back and how that will relate to being a solicitor. They're my top tips on that one. I could go into more detail, but we've only got a few minutes, so I don't want to take too much of your time. Oh, another one on that one just come to mind. If you read your application and you think that you could replace RPC with a different firm and it still makes sense, there's not enough detail in it. It needs to be very specific to RPC. So yeah, if you could replace it, you could use a firm and replace as a practice. Just pick another firm, replace RPC with that firm. If it makes sense and doesn't sound odd and not aligned to a firm, then yeah, it probably isn't specific enough to RPC. Are grades or work experience more important for the application process? I think it's a little bit of both. I think work experience is so important, but it is an intellectual job. It's a great job, but there is an intellect there needed. So I think it's a real balance. I don't think you should focus all your time on your studies. Do get involved in other experiences and make sure like the more well-rounded you are, I think that's going to really help you through application processes. Is there a minimum amount of work experience? No, there's not a minimum amount of work experiences, but just include everything that you have done. because it just gives us more of an insight of what you've been getting up to. I have a year's worth of work experience from a year in industry, but it was in marketing, not law. So I'm unsure how helpful that would be. That would be amazing. Any experience seriously can translate into being a lawyer and the kind of skills that you develop. I would definitely think about work experience as more about the skills that you can showcase rather than the legal knowledge that you can showcase. The reason why you're doing a training contract is to learn and develop. We're not looking for someone who's the finished article. We're looking for someone who's got the potential to be great and a great lawyer. So think about the transferable skills and don't worry if it's not legal, as that's absolutely fine. What sort of mitigating circumstances does RPC take into consideration? I have suffered the loss of 3 family members over my studies and wish to know how to mention this if it is relevant. Really sorry to obviously hear that. It must have been a really hard time. If you feel comfortable, obviously you can disclose it, and that would be taken. I think any mitigating circumstances are taken into consideration, but yeah, if you feel comfortable, but obviously really sorry to hear that throughout your studies, and do include that if you may have not reached kind of the grades that you may have wanted, but we do definitely take them into consideration. How would low A level grades put me at a disadvantage? We don't have an A level requirement, so you don't need to put your A levels in, but we would encourage you to, so we can get the fuller picture. But we don't have an A level requirement. It's just a university requirement of a 2-1. But if you have mitigating circumstances, we can take that into consideration. But there is actually no minimum A levels for a training contract. So we've got a couple more. Well, we actually got one more before we finish. So I'll answer this one. During the 2-year gap to the training contract, is there any salary pay, and what do you recommend successful candidates do apart from SQE qualification? So obviously you have SQE, which is a year, so you'll get a maintenance grant for that. In regards to the other year, it's completely up to you what you want to do. Some of our trainees got paralegal jobs, whether that was at RPC or other firms. Some people went traveling. Take that opportunity to have a year of doing whatever you want, because once you obviously start your career in law, there's not going to be many opportunities where you can have a year to do anything you want. So I know it's great to get paralegal experience, and you might be helpful, but if you really want to go traveling and do what you want to do, or work in a different sector. If there's a particular sector you might want to get some just experience in because you've got an interest, it's completely up to you. But people get up to a real mix of things. But yeah, up to you completely. Do whatever makes you happy for that year, I would say. Right.
Amazing. Sorry, I just wanted to come on and thank Lauren so much for all of the information and questions that she's provided this afternoon. I can see a lot of people are really grateful and found it really informative. So thank you so much, Lauren. And thank you everyone who's joined as well. I've seen a few questions about whether this will be recorded. It has been recorded, and we will be popping it onto our Target Jobs website. So if you go onto the Target Jobs website and type in RPC, it will come up on that search. But for now, thank you so much for joining everyone, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and good luck with all those applications.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks.